I know some people's access has been sorted out, some people's hasn't. We've been emailing back and forth with Microsoft for about a week now, daily. They sent me an email kind of overnight saying things should be fine. So if you look in your Azure portal, a few people will be kind of in different scenarios. So the first thing to check when you log into Azure is if you can go down to your cost management and billing section. There's probably going to be a few people with have a few different scenarios here. Be nice if this actually loads.
Yeah, mine are loading.
Awesome. Okay, we may have to come back to this later in the class. There's basically 3 scenarios I've seen in my other classes. One scenario, which is your account like mine, where it says Azure for Students Starter. And in that case, if you go to the database section over here, if I go and click SQL Database and click Add, it prompts me to upgrade, which is obviously an issue. There's a workaround for this. Well, there's 2 workarounds. I'm going to show you both. If you have Azure for Students Starter, you can actually still create a database. You just can't do it the obvious way. The obvious way is databases. Click Add. And then you get this, so I'm stuck. However, if you only have the Azure for Students Starter, you can actually create a database this way. If you go to App Server and add through here, the second option is web app plus SQL. So this lets you create a web application as well as an SQL database together. And for some reason, this is available through the starter, whereas the SQL database on its own is not. If that makes any sense to you, maybe you can explain it to me because I don't understand it, but it seems to work. So if you click web, you click create. So let's say you want to set up assignment 1. So the first thing it wants is the web app portion, which will run on a subdomain of azurewebsites.net. You just give it some kind of unique subdomain. For the resource group, this really doesn't matter. If you have an existing resource group, you can pick it. If you don't have any, you just click on create new. The whole point of a resource group is really, let's say you have 10 different applications for 10 different clients. You can create a group for each client where you're grouping their database and their website together. It doesn't really apply to us. So whatever you pick in that section is kind of irrelevant. So once you name the website and it tells you, okay, this is a unique name, this is good, you click, and then you can create a new database from here. And it asks you to set up 4 things. Name your database, give it a server name, which will be, instead of a suffix of azurewebsites.net, it'll be .database.windows.net plus whatever prefix you give it. And then it will ask you to create a username and password for your database. So this will work even if you have the Azure for Students Starter. I don't think it's supposed to, but it does. So we won't complain. Once you set up the database, please make sure you create a text file or a Word document on your computer that has those 4 credentials: database name, server name, username, password. Because in order to create the database in Management Studio and then connect your web project to it, you'll need those 4 credentials. So just create a simple text file that holds all of those things. So I won't go ahead and do it. I'll just show you the screen. So here's where you put in the name, and then the target server, you set up the server username, password. And it requires a strong password. I think their rules are, it'll tell you, but I think it's 8-character minimum, an uppercase, a lowercase, a number, and a special character. And you can't use the username in the password. So once you set that up, you should be able to create a database. There may be some other people in this section, the cost and billing, who, when they went here into the subscriptions, it actually showed they had 2 subscriptions. That Some people, it says Azure for Students Starter and Azure for Students. I see a few nods. If this is you, then you can actually create the database on your own without the web application. Here's how you do it. So if you get both and you just want to create a database, how you do it. You go to SQL Databases, and I don't have this here, but there's a blue link here that I think says Subscription Settings. If you click that, it probably defaults to your starter plan. And you can uncheck the starter and uncheck the starter plan and just pick Azure for Students. So you're in effect saying, I'm working within the Azure for Students plan. And then you should be able to go ahead and create a database under the Azure for Students plan. I had a number of people do this on Friday and it worked for them. Okay, I may have to come and look at it. So everybody should be able to create the database in one of these two ways now for your assignment. Either go through app services and create the web and SQL applications together, or if you have the two subscriptions, pick the Azure for Students subscription, and then it will allow you to create a database in that case. Either one should work. I'm going to maybe suggest before you leave class today that you try to set your database up. And if there's anybody who does still not have access to create the database, you may have to let me know. You have a question?
So if we're using the web app plus SQL, that's just, we're not using anything on our machine, like we're not using SQL Server Manager.
Well, you'll still need Management Studio to you create the database here, but you're still going to use Management Studio to connect to that database and build your tables for your assignment. So when you go through this process, it creates a database, but it's blank. There's nothing in it. Right, and that's why I'm suggesting you put those credentials in a file, because to use Management Studio to connect to it, you're going to need to put in the host, database name, username, and password. There's one other trick you'll need after you set up your database here. Once your database is created, by default, Azure does not allow remote database connections. So what we need to do is open up the firewall to the database so that you can connect to it both through Management Studio and also through Visual Studio when you're building your web application. So once you've created your database, it will show up here. It'll show up in two places. In your list of SQL databases, it will show up. Or if you go to all resources, it also shows up here, where it's got the little SQL containers. So this one is the server, this one is the database itself. So once you've created your database, on the overview page, if you select it, this is the main page. It shows you the name of the server. It won't show you the username and password. To open up the firewall, you click this Set Server Firewall. And you'll see three text boxes in the middle of the page. So in here, create a rule. So the first text box is just a string naming the rule. You can just call it like everyone or all. The next two text boxes, you need to copy down the two values I have down below. Basically, this will allow any IP address to access your database so long as they have the right username and password. Now, if you only want to allow connections from the college, that will work. You can just click Add Client IP, and that will it'll read our current IP address and add it. That means if you go home or you're at Starbucks, you're away next weekend, and you try to connect your database, it'll say your IP is not authorized. Yeah, so you can do it one IP at a time, or you can just allow all IPv4, and that way, no matter where you are, you can connect to your database. So I would recommend doing that. So you just put in this full range, 0 to 255, all subnets, and then just click Save. Until you do this, you won't be able to connect to your database through Management Studio or Visual Studio. It'll say it's connected, but your IP is blocked. We're not authorized is what will happen if you don't enable the firewall. So this is just a one-time thing. Just do this when you create the database. You don't have to do it again. You can see I already set this rule up before, so my previous rule shows up here. Most cloud services work the same way. Google Cloud, if you create a database there, it's the same thing. By default, you can't connect into it remotely. You've got to explicitly allow either a list of IPs or a range of IPs in order to be able to access it from a remote server. I'll just write them. So there's your start IP, there's your end IP. And you can put any string in that first text box. It doesn't matter, it's just a name for the rule. Right? If you only want to allow 2 IPs in, you might have school and home, for example, and you just put in the same IP as start and end. So everyone should be able to set up the database. Is there anybody who still has no access to create a database on Azure? Okay. So what does your subscription say?
I have no subscription at all.
No subscription at all. Okay. You? Okay, and you have the free tier. What? No subscription? Okay, if you have no subscription, then you guys should be able to get one. So it's actually through the instructions. So the way to get the subscription is through the Imagine store. So if you just do a search for the Georgian College Imagine store, it'll bring up the link. So through the on the hub, so that's probably the first link that comes up. Okay, so go here, sign in with this version of your email address, your student number at student. You've probably been in the Imagine store. Are you able to access the store?
I can. I'm verified, but I'm not eligible to actually download anything.
Okay. So Kelsey, I may have to come have a look at yours. I'll go through the process. You can try it. So when you sign in, you should see Azure for Students. It's actually the first option. If it doesn't show up in the product list, you can search in the search box for Azure for Students. So if you can, select Azure for Students, add it to your cart and check out. It may allow you to do this because there's no download feature here. It's just add to cart and check out. It may or it may not. You can let me know. Yep. You don't have to pay. If they don't have your credit card, they can't charge you anything. So just don't put it in your credit card and you'll be okay. It used to, they've changed it recently. So you're able to add it to your basket and check out. Okay. So then if you go to your account orders, it'll show you, should show you your order. And if you click view details, it used to show it here, but now it will show click here to access. Click that link, and then it should take you to a page where it says where there's an activate button. Try that and kind of give me a thumbs up or down if that works for you. Several people did it Friday and it did work, and then their subscription in the portal showed as Azure for Students, and they could just go ahead and create stuff. So just kind of give me a wave, you as well. Let me know what happens. And Kelsey, keep me updated.
It's the same thing I had with Visual Studios last week, where if I'm not signed in, I can see it, but once I sign in, it's just gone.
Okay, I might have to come and have a look at break. Is that working for it? Did you get the activation screen? Just waiting? Okay. All right, let me know. Where are we? Whoops. Does anybody have other questions about how to set up your database? I imagine a lot of you just did it right, went through the process right now. Question? You can connect to it through Visual Studio. You can't create a new database on Azure through Visual Studio. You have to do it through the portal. You did? All right. Okay. Well, I'm wrong. Okay. Everything I just said, ignore it because I'm wrong. Yes. If you want to do it that way, I guess you could. I've never done it through there. I didn't know you could. I guess if you go through here, yes, I guess, you know what, through here, so you probably went Azure. Okay, so you did it right through here. So if you sign into your Azure account from within Visual Studio, I guess you can do it here. Yeah, so you could create a service here. Okay. So yeah, you have to sign into the Azure account here to do that. Another way of doing it. Yes, Mark?
Yeah, so this is our assignment. I've actually just created the database and tables for my assignment in the MySQL Server management. So in regards to Azure, like, is there any way to like import the databases and tables?
So you created it on your local server?
Yeah.
Okay, so yes, someone else was in my office. It is possible to do. So here's how you can do it. Good question. Now, it's probably only have 2 tables, so considering how the database is small, you may want to just recreate them, just connect. But yes, you can import and export databases. I'll show you how that works through Management Studio. So once you've set up your assignment database, right, you've got those 4 credentials. If you enter them here, you can connect to it. And if you click the remember, those credentials will be saved every time you come back. You can just choose your server. So here's my music store, for example. So, sorry? It's 2007. So if you want to import, here's how you do it. So here's my database on Azure, right? If I right click it and go to tasks, there's an import data. So it's a wizard. I'll just click next. So I want to import from, so I choose SQL Server, which is the last option, from one SQL server to another. Pick the server name, so I can pick my local server. So now I have to log in to my local one. I'm already logged into Azure. I shouldn't have clicked that drop down because now I gotta wait. I should have just typed the server name. Oh, so that was useful. So I could actually just do local. That brings up my local. I'm saying from my local server. I click next. Whoops. Sorry. So from my local server, which is SQL Server, to my Azure server, I've got to authenticate again. So now it will say, what do you want to choose? Do you want to write a query to select and copy data, or do you want to just copy tables and views? So I'll just copy tables and views. So here are the tables in my local database. So if I just say, oh, this won't work because I already have the tables in both. But if my Azure database was blank, I'd click next, click finished, and it will copy both the table structure, the relationships, as well as any data from my local to my live server. That's one way of doing it. The other way you can move SQL around is I could take my local server, so I'll just connect here. So that's one way, is using the import. So you can either import from one or export from the other. The other way you can do it is you can make a backup file. So I could take my local one, and if I click on tasks, I can create a backup, which creates a .bak file. So this will save it to that directory. And then over here on my Azure database, I can do a restore. So if I do tasks, I guess we don't have access on Azure to do it. On most other servers, you do. So you can either do an import export, or you can do a backup restore. Both will work. Depends if you include those tables. So it depends whether you select them or whether you don't. Usually, most of the time, I will do a backup and restore. If I'm working locally and I'm ready to put it on the server, typically I'll just take a BAK file, and then most hosting portals will have a restore option that let you browse to a BAK file, and they will overwrite the existing database with the backup copy. That's typically how it works. So once you've created your database, you're going to have a blank database here on Azure. And then you can go ahead and just build your tables. Or if you created it locally, you could do an import if you want. You don't need, I mean, your database should be relatively simple for the assignment. You only need 2 or 3 tables.
Oh, and I've also already created models for those tables in Visual Studio.
That's okay, because as long as the tables don't change, you can change the connection string in Visual Studio. You don't have to rebuild it unless you've changed the tables. As long as the structure's okay, those model classes, because they're independent of your connection string. So you don't have to redo those.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to ask. Like, I leave the
Yep.
string in every
Well, you can leave it, but you have to change the database from pointing to your local. It will now need to point to Azure. So you could, Mark, just go into web.config, right? And you could just change these values in the connection string property from local. So you don't have to redo all that stuff. Just change the values. Okay, it's 10:02. I think we will take a pause here. First thing we'll do when we'll come back, we set up Azure. We haven't actually looked at publishing our web application to Azure through GitHub with continuous deployment. So we'll walk through that process because you'll want to do that for the assignment. Okay, then we'll do a quick run through of what we did last week, and then we should have some time to get into security. So let's take 10 minutes here.